welcome back to Road 237 as I continue my marathon of Italian horror and Giallo films. And before I get into that, I gotta give one fair warning. If I look or sound any worse than usual, or if you hear anything else going on in the background, we're dog sitting. I do that because who knows how long it's gonna be, despite being super allergic to dogs. So I'm told that's what we're doing. So yeah, hear anything else going on, or if I look or sound any worse, it's that. But anyway, so I'm continuing my Italian marathon, and I know my previous video, which was a review for Sergio Martino's Your Vice is a Locked Room and Only I Had the Key, I said I was going to try to space out the ones I suspect will be good and try to mix up good and bad as far as what I can tell. But if you saw that review, you know I loved that movie, so I had to see another Sergio Martino one that I recently picked up. And this is the Giallo he did just prior, or just after. I think this was his fourth Giallo. All Colors of the Dark. It came out in 1972, the same year as Vice is a Locked Room. So this was the year before Torso. So that's Mrs. Ward, Scorpion's Tail, Vice. So this is his fourth Giallo. And from what I can tell, this one seems to be, other than Torso, ranked amongst his highest, or one of his highest, from many fans. I'll probably say I still liked Locked Room more, but this was still a very good movie. And of course, this is the Severin release. I know there's a Blu-ray, and I know if on Black Friday, the year this came out, you could have got these two as a combo pack in Blu-ray. And yes, I imagine the Blu-ray for this looks awesome, because this is a very visual film. But yeah, so directed by Sergio Martino. Again, great. I still have two more of his to get to: Case of the Scorpion's Tail, which is a Giallo, and Slave of the Cannibal God. I'm not sure what I'll do next, but it of course stars the ever gorgeous, ever beautiful Edwidge Fenech, George Hilton, Susan Scott, Ivan Rasimov, who, Rasimov and Fenech were in Locked Room. Also stars Cumani Quasimodo, which I've never seen someone actually have that name before. But yeah, this is a really good Giallo. I actually want to get that person's name right, because the names are all really tiny on there. Maria Cumani Quasimodo. She plays the elderly neighbor. Now, first off, yes, Italy does have a habit of making unofficial sequels and paying homage to famous Hollywood films. I don't think this was inspired by, even though many people think it is, or that it's a blatant ripoff of Rosemary's Baby. I definitely see the similarities, but I don't think it is. I mean, it is very close thematically. Although I will say some aspects, I still gotta say I do like Rosemary's Baby more, which I still have not reviewed. But I was really surprised by this movie because, like I said in my last review for Your Vice's Locked Room, I was like halfway through this and I was like, how is this a Giallo? There's no mystery. There's no like murder case or even really much of a murder. Well, I mean, there is, but they don't really treat it like an active case. So I was just like, how is this a Giallo? And then at the end, of course, it, like the whole last act, it really makes sense. And it's very different from Locked Rooms. So Martina was able to do that again to me by not just making a Giallo, or I'm like, how is this a Giallo? Then having it make sense to me in this totally original, different approach to the genre, but having it be very different from the previous effort. Um, and that each film I see by Martino, it is. I've said before, he deserves to be ranked up there with Bava, Fulci, and Argento. The more films I see of his, the more he's climbing that rank to becoming maybe my favorite Italian director. Uh, yes, the fans of Italian horror and Giallo do think he's great and that he is revered, but overall, fans of horror, he is still kind of underrated. Because Argento may have revolutionized Giallo and made the biggest string of great Giallos and really defined the term. But, there is a formula to his films, somewhat. And Martino was just able to do these Giallos that don't even feel like Giallo, but they are. It all makes sense at the end. Everything comes together. It feels like a totally different original film. Yes, aside from being a lot like Rosemary's Baby. Uh, Also, in my last review, I said of Fannick's performance that it was like her most darkly charismatic and most sinister performance so far from what I've seen of her. And I actually forgot she was in $5 for an August Moon, which I did review. This, from what I've seen so far, is her finest performance. Like, this is one of those movies where, because it also transcends Giallo, it's very much like a psychological horror film where it really does hinge on the performance of its lead. And the lead has to carry this film. The performance really has to make it work. That's the main selling point. And she is so believable and so vulnerable, and you feel so bad for her. And just the whole thing, because the whole thing about this movie is she's playing this woman who has these terrible nightmares with this one familiar figure played by Ivan Rasimov in all of them, who has these very vibrant blue with like jagged lightning lines in them, contacts. And she starts seeing him in her everyday life. And it gets to the point where she cannot distinguish reality and dream. And then this cult gets involved, and there's sort of this no way out. This thing is huge, it's bigger than I am, everyone is involved, and they're all out to get me. Which, an alternate title for this, I think in some countries, was They're Coming to Get You. Which, that is the thematic similarity with Rosemary's Baby. The whole, I have nowhere to run to, I have no one to turn to, the paranoia. There's, nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. They're gonna find me. Everyone I see, I can't tell what's real. And that, I will say, Polanski did do a better job with the paranoia, but this was still phenomenal in that aspect. I'll get more into the plot with spoiler warning. But first, I do gotta give credit to Bruno Nicolai, who did the music, because the music is also uh, very versatile throughout. They're very different pieces for different parts. Uh, the editing, which was done by Eugenio Alabiso, is also very different than what I've seen in other Martino films. This is a very psychedelic film, and not in like a Cronenberg delirium kind of way, but where it is these psychedelic, trippy dreams, nightmares, and then just some of the tricks with editing. Like I don't know what it's called, but like someone when Rasimov comes towards the camera with the knife, it's like that kind of repetitive shot. The with like this shing kind of music each time, kind of like that repetitive shot. Has a great pace. I mean, it's 95 minutes. So yeah, this is, I will say this is definitely a better horror film than Your Vice is a Locked Room. I'll say that's a better Giallo, and I may have enjoyed that story a bit more, but this one was still great. Uh, and just a lot of the shots, like Martino knows how to use. I don't know if it's a widescreen shot, but when we're with that Black Mass sect, and like someone enters their chapel, it's like this beautiful widescreen shot, and there's some great tricks with lighting in Fannick's apartment, like with these red and green lights in different rooms. Looks excellent. So this movie opens up with a nightmare where we see I've seen that other woman before, but I can never remember her name. Dominique Bochero. She what the hell else was she in? 'Cause I know I've seen her before. Okay, she's in Who Saw Her Die, which I haven't seen yet, but I do have that. Oh, I could have swore I've seen her in other things. She's naked on a bed. There's a pregnant woman on a gynecology table who's naked. She's kind of rubbing blood on herself. There's Ivan Rasimov with his blue contacts and his knife. And then there's this other, I could have swore it was an old guy with like the little blonde girl wig and dress and black teeth doing like these weird dances. And it's like spotlight lighting, almost like a stage production. There's black everywhere, which has a very kind of Lynchian kind of vibe to it. And that kind of tapping noise for music that kind of has like that creepy crawly kind of sound. So like the pregnant woman's rubbing blood on herself. The woman on the bed is screaming, trying to prevent Rasimov from stabbing her. The other woman's doing her weird, crazy faces. And then it goes into like this negative color shot of like POV of a car swerving into a tree. And we find out that Fannick plays this woman named Jane, who recently suffered a car accident that caused her to miscarriage, and I think it exacerbated her trauma from seeing her mother get killed, and just all that trauma at once is starting to manifest itself through nightmares. And she's trying to get help with it. Nothing's really working. George Hilton, I guess they're married, but I think it was kind of confusing because there was at one point where a character says they're not married. But either way, I think it's like the one tiny plot hole, if anything. It doesn't really matter. No, he wants her. He actually, I think he's the one that tries to fight her from seeing this psychiatrist. But oh, her sister Barbara, who's played by um, Susan Scott. She's the one that recommends psychiatrists. Her husband doesn't really like the idea, but she goes. He's kind of flaky. He doesn't really give her much advice. He just says, it'll pass. But then she meets her new neighbor in her complex named Mary, a new young neighbor named Mary, who was played by, you think I just leave this thing open, who I'm guessing is kind of like the elderly neighbor from Rosemary's Baby, if we're connecting the dots. She's played by Marina Malfatti. She suggested Jane that she come to her this Black Mass sect, this sort of ritual, and it's this bizarre, highly sexualized ritual. She goes, things seem to be fine. She thinks she's cured. She has sex with her husband. And the ritual is like the leader comes in and he has sex with her. He has like these long sort of costume fingernails. She thinks she's fine, but then she keeps seeing Rasimov all over the place in her day-to-day life and in her nightmares. As the film progresses, she's unable to distinguish real life from dreams. And then she keeps going back to the sect for more ceremonies, and they become more and more darker, more bizarre. And it just keeps building up, and the paranoia of seeing him in both worlds, and then along with the rituals, she can't distinguish dream and reality. Seems like everyone is in on it, everyone's out to get her, and her paranoia builds. So before we get to spoilers, yeah, it's a great build-up. It does have a lot of suspense. It's the kind of performance where it really is driven by the psychology of the lead. So, I mean, your lead has to have a damn good performance to sell this movie. And Fanek does a wonderful job. Yeah, this is definitely, I think, her best performance. And you feel so bad for her. She I mean, going back and forth, or watching back to back, Locked Room and this, where, you're glad what happens to her in that movie because she's such an awful person, and then in this you feel so bad for her. Yeah, she's great at playing paranoid and vulnerable. Everyone does a great job. And then, so like halfway through, I'm like, where's the mystery? How is this a Giallo? But the whole third act, which does kind of feel a lot like the third act of Rosemary's Baby, it all does make sense. So I'm going to get into spoilers now I'm 20 minutes in, but this is a don't miss Giallo. I put this up there with Your Vice is a Locked Room, Torso. Just like with Locked Room, this might be a new top 10 Giallo for me. I mean, I'm putting in more Sergio Martinos and taking out more, like, Argentos for my top 10. But there's a whole lot to like about this. The music, a lot of the shots, it's got a lot of really awesome shots, especially with the lighting, or if it's widescreen, or like some that's very like low to the ground, and it's in like this regular lit room. Then like there's this one room in the background that has like a red light, and it shines through, so you get kind of like this warped view of someone walking close. And great performances, really good story, has a great pace. Definitely don't miss this. If you're a Giallo fan and you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. But with that, I'm going to get into spoilers. At one point in the film, we do see that her husband Richard is having an affair with her sister Barbara. And then there's one meeting this ritual where Jane is coerced into killing Mary. Mary is to be sacrificed. And she's given the knife. She doesn't want to do it. She can't bring herself to do it. But Mary just grabs her by the shoulders and pulls herself into her. So, yeah, she still did it, but it's like she made herself do it. And you have these, there's a couple back and forths between her and Rasimov, one of which he tells her that the knife that he's been carrying and that she used to kill Mary was the one that was used to kill her mother. And her mother was killed because she was part of the sect and she tried to leave. So that's part of the twist. And then so eventually Fennec feels there's nowhere to turn, so she hides out with this elderly couple out in the country. Of course, Rasimov catches up to her there. And there's this great, what I meant earlier with like that repetitive shot is one of the chase scenes. She's in her apartment. I think it's her apartment. And Rasimov comes in, and it's like this cool, low-to-the-ground shot. I think this one room off to the corner is lit red, and the red kind of comes out. And the music's like this, boom, 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 as he walks up to the camera. As he takes his knife, it's like this, like, shing, 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 like this kind of repetitive shot. And then her, like, repetitive screaming shot. Just, it works so well. I thought that was really neat. The scene when Mary comes in to be killed is this gorgeous widescreen shot, which also the reason why Mary was set up to be killed was because she brought in this person of no experience, this novice, this outsider. And that was sort of to solidify, by Jane killing her, that kind of solidified her initiation, because she woke up with the symbol, which is like a triangle eyeball, something we've seen in movies before. And that's like their symbol. And then we get to the end where, and one thing that Martino does do well, because one thing that does keep us guessing is, obviously we're supposed to wonder how much of what is she seeing real and how much is not. But he has several characters that she's supposedly seeing in a dream, talking to each other where Jane is not present. So it's like they are real characters. So that helps the guessing. It helps keep us guessing, I should say. At one point, she wakes up in a hospital, and it's got this really nice, like, hazy, white, foggy kind of filter or look to it. And then her husband, Richard, sneaks her out of the hospital, takes her home. Elevator's not working, so he has to go up to get their stuff so they can just flee and hide. But the leader of the sect is up there, kills Richard, but then she wakes up. Richard's there. And then they kind of redo that whole scene, but it's played out differently. Only now they find out that the sect has kind of been dissolved. And the leader is the only one that's left. But before that, there is a scene between Richard and the sister Barbara, where Richard does kill her. And it's because he finds out it did have something to do with inheritance and and so Richard kills her because Barbara's the one that's behind the whole thing. Wants to take over the mother's legacy, is in charge of the sect, essentially. And, another whole thing with inheritance. But, so after he kills her, we then get the scene with the hospital where he breaks her out. Elevator doesn't work. The leader's up there, kills her. Cops show up, but then she sees that the leader is one of the cops, takes her away. And then the cops in the car have the tattoos. So it's like that Rosemary's Baby. Everyone you go to is in on it. But then she wakes up. They do sort of do the whole dream, broken elevator. But she's able to call out to Richard. He fights off the leader. And then there's like a chase up on the rooftop. He falls off and dies. And since it's an Italian film, it just ends. Kind of with her implying that hopefully it's over now. Also, when Rasimov gets killed, who I think he's just a hitman for the sect, his tattoo is on his wrist. And when he dies, there's like a blood drop on his wrist, so it looks like the eye is crying. I thought that was a nice little touch. It sounds like I'm rambling, but I'm kind of just trying to wrap everything up. This is a very good movie, and this is definitely one of the best Giallos that is really more than just a Giallo. I mean, it's a great psychological horror film. Yeah, it's a lot like Rosemary's Baby, but it doesn't feel like a ripoff. It has its own merits. It is very suspenseful. You do feel for the lead actress, who does do a great performance. It does have that claustrophobic paranoia. Who can I trust? What's real? What isn't? What's good? What's bad? The dream sequences are pretty trippy. And, it does... It never gets boring. It does mix things up a bit with the crazy style of edit or colors and lighting. It's not too sleazy. I notice some of the Fanic ones really are not that sleazy, except for maybe Strip Nude for Your Killer, which she only has like a minor role, the ones I've seen so far. So it's definitely more driven by story, but there is plenty of blood when we actually do get a kill. Because like I said, it's not like a serial killer or like a spree or like a case to be solved. It is the mystery of this sect and who killed their mother and why these people are after her. And, which is very different for a Giallo. Just like Locked Room was. And I give Martino all the credit in the world for taking just a year prior was when Crystal Plumage came out, which rewrote the textbook of Giallo. And Martino just in the same year does two movies that is a totally different approach and are great examples of the genre. Definitely a new top 10 for me. I really like this movie. Not as much as Locked Room, but I still enjoyed it quite a bit. So yeah, Sergio Martino's All Colors of the Dark. Stay tuned for more Italian films and Giallos. Thank you for watching.